And you're coming up now to the 50th anniversary, or the 100th anniversary of 1916.
Oh yes.
And sorry, I'll just give you this. It's a poster.
Yes.
If you can just hold that up.
Now I have here a poster, one of the ones I've collected over the years. It was from when Sinn Fein was in 2 Lower Kevin Street. This was for the Diamond Jubilee, which was the year I was talking about to you, the 50th anniversary of the 1916 Rising, and this was the poster that was issued then. And you can see the signatories, the 7 signatories, and we salute the 1916 Men of Violence, Diamond Jubilee. Now we're into the centenary in
That's a great poster.
a couple of months, and the same thing can apply. They are in fact, they still remain, if you want to call the volunteers of my time, of my life, men of violence, well then you must apply the same to Pearson Conley. I just have a lot of things here, but this again goes back to the period I was speaking of, Sinn Fein, and for to have a regional government, which would be part of the era in our programme. I would also like to show you something I have here. This is one of thousands of examples of some work that the foreign solidarity groups did in different countries in their own languages. This is one from France. It's Irlande Nouvelle, the new Ireland, and as you see, it shows you Ireland, and it says visit Ireland, Cé Míle Fáilte.
Just hold up a little bit more there for the
So it goes on to tell you, for your holidays the people will welcome you, but remember the power of the state. This was with the draconian powers of the southern state, with the heavy gang, the outlawing of, attempted outlawing of going to Bodenstown, about the offences against the State Act, and one thing and the other on and on. Now thousands of these were stuck up around Paris and around the Irish embassy and the British embassy, and that was the type of work that they could do very effectively. That's only one of lots of examples. I'll show you others at a different time. This was another type of propaganda that we carried on then, but it was very, very true at the time. And if you just forget the photos of the people that are in this and just think of the present day photos that would be there, you can actually see that it would apply to the present day. More British than the British themselves, and that was an inter-party government at the time. You recognise that of the faces. Then they are more British than the British themselves. Leave them behind and build a new Ireland. Now that was published, 45 years ago maybe, and it's relevant to today. And I would say yes, I'd say that's a message for today. So I don't think that the Republican movement has ever really changed. And when I say movement, you have of course different names and different groups, but the Republican movement are Republicans as a whole, and our message I don't think has changed, and I think the same has to go on. For instance, another just slight example at the time, and again relevant to today. Ulster is actually 9 counties, and how long did Ireland partitioned and so with Ulster. So one of the things we were proposing, and it still is relevant, is that you actually have the 4 distinct provinces at the, and Ulster rejoined, and it would help to give a good balance between nationalists and unionists, and they'd work for each other for the good of Ulster within Ireland as a sovereign nation. So a lot of that should not be dumped.
I know this is a very big one.
Now, this is a very, very big one, but it gives an idea of the idealism And this is not going back to 1916, this is in our day, where when the movement split between the official Sinn Féin at the time, as I explained earlier, and provisional. Now of course provisional has gone a different direction in 2015. As I'm sitting here, and you have the Republican Sinn Féin here, but Republican Sinn Féin, and I'm not a member, by the way, I'm not a member of any political organisation. As I think I'm best fitted, an independent Republican, and I try to keep good contacts with all and see the good in them all, and try and, where possible, ignore the bad or try to have it alleviated. So this was a silk screen printing of showing the idea of Éire and New Ireland, and it shows farming, it shows industry, the cog, and it shows the 4 provinces and everything. It's a beautiful design, and it was in Kevin Street, and as you see here, the agriculture, the farming, and there's a fish on the bottom. So you have fishing, farming and heavy industry. It's a very relevant type of thing. And that dream that we've had since well before 1916, going back to 1798 in fact, in my view, it's still alive today. And of course, we show a lot of Pearse and Connolly and all that.
And Singer in this bookshop.
Woodstone and all, but we also have that it's not just nationalistic, but the socialism, especially in this particular premises where we're filming, is I think the James Connolly books. You have James Connolly, Revolutionary Socialist, but that was actually produced by the lads in the last couple of years too. That was alongside of Pearse in places. And there's example after example. I'll just show you one more. See that second one in there? That one, the outer one. I won't bore you with too much of this. You'll probably go into a museum a lot of these, but
Well,
this again.
there is a guy called Alan Kinsella, and he has a blog, the Irish Lecture and Literature blog, and he gathers all of this stuff.
Well,
And he's had exhibitions, and he would just love to see that.
Well, if you give me his name and address and contact, I have so much stuff that
All the stuff we had over the years, I sent it all to him because it has a good home.
Now, this particular one again, it covers the idea of how you could solve all of the questions in Ireland. Again, these are all 40 years old, but relevant today. What the aims are, and what the means are, and what it's all going to be. And hopefully common sense will prevail, and that all the different tensions and splits between the different Republican groupings would realise that we have to have a system similar to this that would bring about a happy, prosperous Ireland in control of our own resources. Oil, gas,
I think you should finish with that
fishing. Well, this is the last one I'll show for one reason. It shows that the only way the Irish question is finally going to be put to rest would be freedom and justice, which brings peace. You cannot have peace without justice. You cannot have justice without freedom, and you cannot have peace without the other two. So Saoirse, Ceart, agus Sír Khan would be unity, peace and freedom. And that's the message I think that should go out from republicanism in general. And
Well, Richard, that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
I also believe that this thing in Ireland about, oh, tit for tat, wood is as bad as the other, Protestant against Catholic, that this whole thing was blurring the whole question to the world and within Ireland itself. And that the way to Ireland needed, above anything else, was to get back out into the world, like I had been before the time of Wolfe Tone and Robert Emmet and all that time. Paris, the continent, Rome, Spain, you know, even going back to the Flight of the Earls, we were always, Europe knew more about us in hundreds of years ago and our situation under the British than they knew in the 1960s. So I realised this had to be counterbalanced, and there was a crying need for the Irish case to get out of the island of Ireland onto the international stage. And I moved out of Brussels after some time. I did return to Ireland once in the interval period. I decided that I was long enough in Belgium. I could have stayed there forever. In fact, at one stage I remember the High Commissioner said to me, Mr. Behal, he said, I have good news for you. We can relocate you in Australia. Maybe if the clock was turned backwards, maybe I should have done that. But I was still, I'm not going to be in enforced exile. I'm not lying down and taking it. I was highly motivated and probably idealistic. And I was also, on account of my fiancée and stuff like that, we didn't later marry or anything, but thereby hangs a story. As I said, being a revolutionary can be hard, and it can be hard on other people. And, you know, nostalgic days, but still. I decided it was time to move on. Before I had gone to Ireland for the quick visit, I appeared in Paris, and by arrangement had a press conference. We gave the press conference, it appeared afterwards in the Sunday Press, Behal in surfaces in Paris. You know, at the time it was all big news. But it was a cover for me because I had slipped back to, and with a sympathetic journalist that was held back a week, I had slipped back to Britain on the ferries, and with cover of an Irish woman who was very sympathetic to the Republican cause, one of my contacts in England. She travelled as my wife back to me to Dublin. So that's when I came back into Ireland. But of course, no one paid me a second glance then. One with my arm around the lady and, you know, nicely dressed and all. And two, the Sunday Press, the day I arrived with the headline, Behal in Paris. So it gave me cover. I eventually left Ireland again, back into Belgium, and from there I cut down through France and finally to contacts established in Spain, including my sister, Yvonne, who died recently. She was a language teacher. So I got medical treatment there, looked after for about 2 months, and then with a false passport I had acquired in my travels. I won't go into all of that, I'll be here for the whole day. I got to the United States of America.
Photographs of
Yeah, I
Europe in
photographed
America.
up on the Eiffel Tower, or down the Empire State Building, with an Irish sympathiser, and I stayed with an Irish family in the Bronx, and you know, an interesting period. But a committee was set up for me because I was fretting in America, and I had known of so many Republicans from the Black and Tan Civil War period in particular, all over, they were so crushed by the Free State, had actually emigrated to America for some years, and they were always going to come back to continue the struggle. But they meet women, they get married, they have children, they have a job, and then the big depression of the 30s, and then a job to survive, and then they're going to come back, and then the Second World War, and now they were old and wondering what happened in my life, like, you know. And I said, am I going to fall into that trap? Now, I was only looking after myself, and my material goods and well-being and everything, I should have married at the time, taken the trip to Australia, or in America, good job, good home, and just reminisce with my feet in the fire or somewhere and a pint in my hand about, the days in Ireland. But I kind of felt the days in Ireland ain't over. And I'm just too romantic or idealistic, but that was the way I felt. So I was going to go back to Ireland to pick up where I left off. I was going to see what was the score now with the Republican movement, contact old comrades and friends, but I had a plan to actually challenge the government in that my detention in Limerick prison from which I escaped was unlawful. And I think I was right in the way that the judge did it. Because up to then Republicans never challenged courts. Whatever's thrown at you, don't recognise the court, end of story. I thought that this was a pile of nonsense, and as I was now an independent man, I could do it, so I was going to do it. So a committee was set up in New York to back me, and I then headed back for Ireland, managed to get in quite safely, and surfaced. And when I surfaced, there was elections for local government taking place, and Sinn Fein at the time had a candidate standing in my home area of Kilmacow. I turned up at the meeting, everyone was aghast with surprise, big welcome back and all, and I just started driving people to the polling booths on polling day within a week of coming back from America. And great excitement and great support, but the word got to the police, of course. This guy, escaper and wanted man and all, he's out in Kilmacow again. They couldn't believe their ears, so they drove out, and rather sheepishly the special branch approached me at a polling station near Kilmacow and said, "Oh my God, it is you." He said, "Come on, you better come with us." Like, they were embarrassed actually picking me up and said, "What in the name of Christ, God brought you home, why didn't you stay away?" But see, this is what they wanted. So I said, I'm not going to be in a force.
Is this about 1967 now?
Yeah, it would be about then. I'm not going to, it was late 67 or beginning of 68. I'm not going to be in an enforced exile. So I'm back. I was put back into Limerick prison, never charged with escaping, but been on remand to go back for the original trial, which had been put back that the jury didn't agree on, i.e. the attack on the warship endangering life, you see. So I was never charged with escaping, and then I initiated the first legal move against the government of habeas corpus, and I was in wrongful detention because the original sentencing by the judge at the circuit court had been inconsistent with the evidence and with the charges. I won't go into the whole legal aspect, but it was that so the day the papers were to be lodged in the High Court in Dublin, I was literally thrown out on the road out of Limerick prison and told to, by the way, appear in Waterford District Circuit Court on such and such a day for your adjourned case. But of course I never turned up, and they could never arrest me because I wasn't out on bail. In the end of the day, the government just drew a line through it, nolle prosecuted. That was the end of the whole thing. Within about a year or so, the rumblings in the north of the civil rights campaign began to heat up. And now I must say I was very tired at the time. I was practically exhausted. I suppose to a degree heartbroken, but still great welcome, great, not the way I went in Ireland. But there was always this thing about the two ideologies now, and while Rory and Dahi and all, but I still wasn't really back in Sinn Fein or with the army. It was a kind of a lulled period. But as the north got worse and worse, I tried to keep as independent as long as I could, and I helped as best I could, and when the North finally blew and the burnings and all started, my friend comrade who had been sentenced to death with me, had been abroad. He had left Ireland to, I think it was South Africa. He cut back, and his tools and all, and his family and all, to follow him back. First thing he did, he looked me up, and of course I was on the Aran Islands at the time with a friend, just if you like, getting an unnecessary recuperation after all the years of tension and running and pressure and death threats and God knows what. And he said, I'm back. He said, need to see it. So it was formed up immediately, and within a day we were on the border, with lads pouring across the border, regrouping defence committees, trying to give them as quick a training as we could. And well, the rest is history as far as that's concerned. But after Bloody Sunday, I officially came back into the Republican movement. I felt that operating on the outside of it, even though there was no problem, it was better now all hands on deck. So Rory and Dahi, I got a great welcome from them, and Kathleen Knowles, the secretary, and Sinn Fein, and the army, which overall still held a lot of the people with difficulty with me, but the average volunteer and people even up to GHQ level, happy as Larry, you know. And well, that was it. In Sinn Fein then, I was elected to the Ard Choler, and before long I kept trying to impress upon the army and Sinn Fein that just our struggle in the north and all this about the old shibboleth about Catholics versus Protestants, which of course it never really was that over Bibles. It was just a cover, a camouflage of the continuing imperialism and privileged positional loyalism. That this story was being believed to a large extent abroad, and in the continent, all the newspapers all were on about this centuries-old religious war in Ireland. And I said, we've got to go out there. And I told them about my experiences after my escape and after being a refugee in Belgium. I said, we should, for a start, set up some kind of an office in Europe, however we can do it. And Europe is more important, and we already have lots of contacts in America, and we have lots of contacts to Canada and lesser to Australia, the English-speaking world. But we've got to get to the continent, where Geneva, the United Nations, the International Labour Court, where great sympathy from the French through history for us and the Spanish now, we've got to get there. We've got to show them what this war in Ireland is really about, and get the colonial aspect, because the UN had passed the decolonialism treaties, which was decolonialising Africa and countries in the Middle East and all over the world, that we should be, our problem was basically colonial. So we needed to be out there with these bodies, and Rory O'Grady, and to some extent O'Connell, went with my argument, and pressure was put on to do this. So we passed at the Ardesh a resolution. I think I proposed it and Rory seconded the other way, that we set up an international foreign affairs bureau to bring information to the world at large of the true nature of the struggle in Ireland, and to elicit where possible solidarity and support. Well, of course, in the resolution it didn't say military, well, that'd be kind of understood. But certainly political, because I did believe then, I do believe still, that you can achieve a tremendous amount of advancement through political means, provided you meet the right allies and you touch the right levers and you come with a very clear, open exposition of what you're talking about, rather than it being some kind of a con job. That they were the most important things. So we got it through Sinn Fein, and then of course it had to be funded, and it was half half a joke, I suppose, in a way, because the funding I got to go back out, where I'd be trying to pick up after years. There was only one person I really knew when I went back. So many people moved, politicals moved very quickly. And to try and start this whole thing into Europe. And it was a daunting task. I got $1,000, American dollars, and that was it. But I got to Belgium, and between meeting one or two of the old friends, a bit of support, and then I would say the Flemish people in particular, who took us on as a cause they could appreciate, because they felt that they somehow or other were still under the black shadow of the Second World War, that every Flemish person was some kind of a Nazi, which is not true, in fact very untrue. And so yeah, I got a lot of support, and I don't know how I made the $1,000 work, but slowly but surely I got meeting with lawyers, politicians, got well dug in and well settled in Belgium. I still had my refugee status and was registered with the police. I'm sure they kept an eye on me, but strange, I got away with a lot, but we won't go into that. And there was the beginning of a solidarity committee in France. I travelled to Paris, and of course once you got into the network of people on the continent, Pierre knows someone in Marseille, and someone in Marseille knows someone in Lisbon, and all this kind of thing. So you're kind of passed one to the other. And I found that you were almost invariably fed and given accommodation, which of course meant that, except for travel, and sometimes you got travelling with a comrade in a car or something, and some individuals in different countries also began creating the nucleus of solidarity to Ireland. So my job really was contacting them, going to meeting them, talking to them, lecturing, building it up. And it took off actually very, very well. But I can't say that I necessarily started them all, but I certainly strengthened them and then got some kind of cohesion between them, where they then were very good for Ireland, selling documents, going to the British Embassy, putting blockades on British embassies about their abuse in Ireland, about their torture, the hooded men and all this, and one thing after the other. And so Britain was no longer acting with a shield of silence over Ireland within Ireland. She now had the international scene beginning to take more attention. And particularly when we travelled to Switzerland and places and got to meet the INLO and began anti-human rights committees and everything like that. And it began to build. In the end, there were solidarity groups in Norway, Sweden, 2 or 3 in Germany, Belgium. France had about 3 or 4, certainly Paris was very strong, and contacts in lots of other regions, and eventually Rome and places. And they played quite a role, and they brought out musical groups like the Dubliners, for instance, to play, and so there'd be Irish music and a bit of a jamboree in a big hall with all, and everything, and there'd be, and then I would give a talk on the situation in Ireland. Would have photographs then of people shot by the British Army, volunteers maybe in their coffins, or battling people in the street. So bit by bit Ireland was breaking out of the eggshell that had been put around it, and that really and truly had a very the British would say detrimental, but I would say beneficial.
You must be the
effect.
hated figure by the establishment for doing this.
Oh gosh, yes. I actually thought a few times that I was going to be assassinated. I know there was one period, I'm not sure whether I escaped an assassination or not, but I remember I was on a, I think it was in Paris, I know the Gare du Nord, and I was waiting for a train, and some kind of an instinct kept saying to me, move back from the side of the track. And I always have gone with instincts, and if I don't, I usually pay the penalty. And I just at last minute kind of stepped back and turned, and with that, a guy kind of half pushed me with the shoulder, but if hadn't moved a tiny fraction, I was out under the train coming in. It may have been accidental, but everything I think was probably I was going to be shoved under the train. There's lots of things I don't want to talk about, lots of things I won't say because they may have other threads to them, and but I think that was very important work. I was fully backed right through it. I can't say enough about O'Brody's leadership, both as a man of tremendous patriotism and, well, Patrick Pearse there is behind me. I'm trying to think as an all-round Republican, maybe more so even than Condy, who was more of a social agitator than an actual Republican, but a Republican. But I'd say O'Brody, I know he only died a few years ago, was possibly the nearest man in pure intellect and purity of republicanism since Patrick Pearse. But he was a man of great humour too. He loved an old joke. He was not a bit prude, but he was extremely loyal, felt things very deeply, very far-seeing, very intellectual. Had he gone into normal 26 county politics, there's no doubt in my mind that he would have been Taoiseach at the very least, and probably a president of the South at some stage. But O'Brody, his principles weren't for sale. He was probably the most all-round Republican and honest man I've ever met.
So he was like the last of the Fenians, really.
Yeah, O'Connell was a perfect companion and foil for him as well, because they both thought alike, and while they didn't necessarily draw up the Aranua policies themselves, they certainly were very central to them. And they, of course, there was always people in the background, even to the present day, who might have senior positions in firms, in economics, in academia, in trade unions. It could be in finance, it could be anything. There's always patriotic Irish men and women who don't necessarily want to come forward themselves to be identified, but they work as if they had backup background, and they're not looking for limelight. In fact, they're trying to look to be anonymous, you know. So people like that would also have helped to draw up the main tenet of the Aranua programme, which both O'Connell and O'Brody particularly went for 100%. And I think, in fairness, I have to say that Rory's brother Sean, who travelled a lot in France and in Switzerland, was very impressed with the canton system of Switzerland, was always looking at things. So there's a marriage into Aranua of a lot of continental thought, a lot of Irish thought, a lot of constitutional thought, a lot of thought on, what would I call them, communities as such, and the way people think, like the loyalist community being one thing, the nationalist community being another thing, and how they think, and how could you make accommodation for this within an overall context in Ireland. And for the sake of argument, therefore, what was distilled out of all of this was known as the Aranua programme, basically a federal system in Ireland where it's not all centralised power in Dublin drawing everything to itself like a magnet, but that the provinces and even the districts would look after themselves and then send so many delegates to central government who would have the overall power on foreign affairs, finance, postage, stuff like that. But that where possible, a Cantonese type thing, but suitable to the Irish temperament, the Irish situation, etc. That's all married into it. And I think that was while the war was going on in the north, a war of resistance against British and loyalist reaction, their renewal programme was adopted by both Sinn Fein and the army. But thereby hangs another story, and I don't think we could maybe cover it in this particular interview, because it became a big bone of contention later and remains so to the present day. And which I think is a tremendous pity and a tremendous loss, because in my travels abroad during the 70s and the early 1980s, the number of academics, professors in universities, human rights groups, even government representatives that I had the honour to meet in my role as Foreign Affairs Director, all referred to their renewal programme after reading it and said, this is a very, very just and fair proposition to a resolution of the political question in Ireland, not alone vis-a-vis Britain and Ireland, but internally within the pro-British or loyalist and the nationalist camps and the different trends and pressures. And they said, throughout Europe we have regional problems. We can talk about the Catalans, we can talk about the Bretons, we can talk about the Corsicans or the Basques or whatever. And there's all these pulls in different countries and tensions, and even in France itself there's different areas and regions that don't necessarily feel a one unitary state, the same as in Italy, Piedmont and different places. And I mean, you could go on nearly all over Europe and find it, Belgium, whatever. And they said, but this programme could actually be transferred to most countries in Europe, and it would be, with its own variations and adjustments, could actually be very, very useful even within the European context. And so that was abandoned by a whole new incoming group of politicos during the last 30 years. It's a great pity because it kind of, in a way, destroyed that programme. And while the present Republican Sinn Fein still adamantly adhere to it, and wisely so in my view, Ireland would still be sovereign, would still be free, would still be rulers of their own destiny, but it would make allowance for all the different political outlooks and strains within Ireland, so that everyone becomes a first-class citizen in a new Ireland. Now, it mightn't be necessarily the centralised 32-county republic of the first and second Dáil, but it would still fit within the ambit of a sovereign, indivisible, united Ireland in freedom, encompassing all the children of the nation equally, as they say in the proclamation. That's the proclamation of 16 and the Declaration of Independence of the first Dáil in the Mansion House on the 21st of January 1919, that they are still the fundamental foundation upon which everything would come. And that would kind of cover what you want to ask me about the 1960s, why there was this friction between the end of the border campaign and the beginning of the resistance in '69 to the lashback against the civil rights campaign. And we've just kind of scratched, if you like, the surface of foreign affairs and things like that, but there were many other things happened. There was the entry into politics in the South, the European politics, the of course the hunger strikes, and I would imagine for what you've asked me already on those initial questions. I have given you a coverage. I may have missed a lot, but you're getting the gist of it. Well, this is just one example of a meeting in Kilkenny for the Brits Out at the time programme, and the speakers were of course Rory O'Brady, Joe Cahill and myself, and it shows while Joe would be maybe in a different tendency to Rory and I, that there was great unity during the actual early years of the last phase in the campaign in the 70s, and it's just one example of it.